I found out about the Green Book as an adult. I didn't really know anything about it as a child.
I didn't know anything about the Green Book.
I did not know anything about the Green Book until the movie came out a few years ago.
I did not know that we were a part of the Green Book. I'd heard of the Green Book, especially since that movie came out.
We're so excited to be sharing historical sites in Cheraw that were featured in the Green Book. We had several sites that were included. The Green Book first rolled out in 1936, and we did not enter into the Green Book until 1947. And when we did, we had 8 sites that were included and 2 that came along later. So we had 10 sites in Cheraw featured in the Green Book, and then we had 2 other sites on the outskirts of Cheraw that were included.
I was introduced to the Green Book by a couple who are friends of ours, and they told us to go watch the movie. Well, after watching the movie and then being approached by someone actually showing me in one of the Green Books the listing of my mom's beauty shop, I really got excited about it and started doing more reading about it. I think it's absolutely remarkable that Cheraw is a part of that history. It was, we had always heard growing up that there were certain places that Black people were not allowed to go, but having the movie come out, having the books to be reproduced, sort of solidifies what Black people had to go through during those years.
I discovered the Green Book in the early 2000s when I was doing other research on sites in Cheraw, and decided to start trying to compile all of these sites. And so it was exciting to me when the South Carolina African American Heritage Commission decided to start a Green Book for the state of South Carolina. I knew that I wanted these sites to be included, and I'm so glad that they're including some of our sites in the Green Book. Like I said, many of these sites, they're still around, and a lot of the sites are still owned by the same family. I think that Cheraw was included in the Green Book because there were several U.S. highways that ran through the hub of Cheraw. You had U.S. Highway 1, you had U.S. Highway 52, and then you had U.S. Highway 9. And those roads were traveled to go from north to south, east to west, and so that played a role in having sites here that African Americans could have safe haven when they were traveling. We had places that were tourist homes that lodged families who were coming through the area. We had restaurants. We even had a gas station where they could fill their car up. There was also a beauty salon where you could get your hair fixed, as well as a barber shop. So I think it is unique that we kind of tried to cover the whole experience when you came through here, to keep you safe while traveling to wherever your destination was. Many of the sites that were included in the Green Book was located on 2nd Street. You had the Motor Inn service station, you had the College Inn, you had the College Inn Tavern, you had the Imperial Barbershop, you had Gate Grill, you had Watson Restaurant.
I know that whole block, and growing up as a kid, that whole block was Black owned and operated. And I know my brother used to go to the pool shop, the pool room. We used to go to a couple of the restaurants down there and get meals.
And then we had two tourist homes that were beside each other on Church Street, and they were Miss Maggie Green Tourist Home and Miss M.B. Robinson Tourist Home. A tourist home was a place where you could find lodging, and it was a safe home for you as you were passing through this area. And oftentimes you could get one meal there while you were spending the night. We even had a beauty salon. We had Mrs. Carrie Bell Lashley. She owned Bell's Beauty Salon on Huger Street. So those were the sites that we had here in Cheraw.
Door is to my right, and this is the attic entrance and the bar that we use if we're having a book. This is the original College Inn building. These are the original booths that were purchased, and they've been here ever since. They were gotten in Charlotte, North Carolina, because my dad didn't know of a place in South Carolina that made these boots, and so he was able to get them in Charlotte. This is the original counter. However, it was closer to the front door when Daddy opened. We moved it further down when we reopened it, and the original shelves were done by Mr. Ed McNeil, and he was a local carpenter from Chesterfield, South Carolina, and Daddy had seen these knotted pine shelves somewhere in his travels, and he wanted to have them here in College Inn. This is the original milkshake machine. This machine has been here forever, and it still works. College Inn was a tourist home as well, and many people stopped to stay overnight, and there was a two-story house in the back. So there was room for them to stay, as well as my daddy continuing to live in the house. It was more of a rooming house than a hotel, because people were looking for some of the comforts of home.
I met my wife in Sunday school, and the only places I could take her was here at the College Inn, and that was all on a Sunday afternoon or Saturday afternoon, and we would come here on a Sunday afternoon when Mr. Cole was serving hot dogs, hamburgers, and especially his milkshakes, and sitting here looking at that machine. I remember that machine there where he used to put them in there, strawberry and vanilla and chocolate.
Mr. C. Charles Cole was the owner of the College Inn. His daughter and I were best friends. So I spent a lot of time at the College Inn as a teenager, rubbing elbows with my best friend Carolyn.
The Valerie Motor Inn is a special place because that site still exists. There's still the original hotel rooms as well as the original signage. The Valerie Motor Inn was owned by Mr. Leon and Mrs. Orley Poe, and they actually named the Motor Inn after their daughter. So I thought that was really sweet and special, and she still owns that property to this day.
The Valerie Motor Inn was started in 1960. My parents started it because they saw a need for blacks to have somewhere to stop to rest. And Highway 1 was the main highway during that time, during the 1960s. So they built a 6-room hotel out where it is now on number 1 highway. My mother was a teacher, my father was an entrepreneur. They kind of got together and decided they wanted to build a motel out there. So they named it after me. That's Valerie. We had a discussion of whether they wanted to name it Lenora or Valerie. I told them to name it Valerie. That sounds better than Lenora. And that's why it was named Valerie Motor Inn.
The Valerie Motor Inn was the black community pride and joy because we had never heard of a black person owning a motor inn. That was always referred to as a white. But when Mr. Poe decided and his wife decided to build that there, that was our pride and joy because he had also a restaurant there. They could go and dance, or tourists come to town, or traveling through. You could always get a room at Valerie Motor Inn at a reasonable price. You didn't have to worry about being segregated because that was just like home if you went there.
One of the first hotels, I guess, owned by blacks that we could safely go to. And since Highway number 1 was a major highway coming through the South, that was interesting.
Mr. Poe and his wife, they were glad, friendly people, and glad you come. And that was our pride and joy because why? That is great big neon sign out front that says Valerie Motor Inn. And we were so proud of that when we passed that. Look what we have now.
There was one guy named Mr. Daniels who drove truck, and he used to stop by there every time he came anywhere near this area. He would come by and stay. I wasn't here during a lot of the times that things were going on, but I remember Dizzy Gillespie staying there quite a bit. Dizzy was my father's cousins, so he always stayed there, and he liked sweet potato pie, so he would come to the house and sit down in the floor and eat a sweet potato pie. My mom had to bake sweet potato pies when he came because he liked them so very much.
Diz lived on Hugo Street, but Diz was mostly associated with another class of boys, so to speak. So we just knew Diz as Diz Gillespie, as John Burke. We just knew him like that, as another person, not as Diz during that time, to tell you the truth. Because he would walk around blowing his little trumpet, maybe stand out there in the yard or on the back porch blowing his little trumpet and whatnot. This was back in his earlier days, before he became famous, before he decided to go to Laurinburg Institute and that type of stuff. And that's how we got to know him, as that. Not as the famous Diz, but as just another boy next door. He was just a marble shooting boy and rolling rims boys like the rest of us. But we lived on one side of Hugo Street, and they lived on the other side of Hugo Street, you know. There was a big oak tree there, and we used to meet in that tree to shoot marbles or what have you. And roll tires and rims and that type of stuff. It was a boy thing. It wasn't, the girl wasn't involved in that time, it was just a boy thing. And I got a chance to really meet the famous Dizzy Gillespie, you know. He would come down, go to John Cole's Hilltop House, and over to the ice plant. That's how I got to know him as growing up famous Dizzy Gillespie. Hilltop House was for grown-ups. You didn't find any young people there. You mostly found most of your senior people there because we went there like on a Saturday and on a Sunday and on special holidays. John Cole, Mr. Cole's brother, he was the owner and operator of it. And he sold beer and wine and food and laughed and grinned and had your special meetings there and all of those things. It was just a place where you could, grown-ups could go and relax and dance. We learned how to dance, to do all those boogaloo dances and all that, camel walk dances and all that stuff. But it was just a place to have fun for grown-up senior people.
A tourist home was a place where you could find lodging, and it was a safe home for you as you were passing through this area. And oftentimes you could get one meal there while you were spending the night.
The home that I reside in now, which is at 209 Church Street, was previously owned by a Miss Maggie Green. I did not know her. When I moved into the home, my aunt and uncle had purchased the home in the mid-70s, around 73, 75. So I just know of the home from them. However, I have heard and read and seen where there was a lady, Miss Mag Green, that owned the home prior, and I think she was a midwife, and she did some, it was like a tourist attraction, or I don't know if it was a boarding house, but somewhere where people did temporarily reside.
Well, Miss Mag was a wonderful, good-looking older lady, he being a young man, but she delivered babies. And I believe I heard Ms. Wilkerson say she delivered her. She was particular too about who she catered to, who she delivered babies. She delivered white and black babies, but she was careful about that. And you had to be. She didn't want you to the people's babies she delivered were just not anybody babies. That's what I'm trying to say to you. She was particular about doing that, but she was a wonderful, good-looking lady, very good-looking.
I was born in 1951, and interestingly enough, I was born in Miss Maggie Green's house on 2nd Street. My parents were boarding in her house at the time, and she was the midwife, and so she delivered me. Belle's Beauty Shop was located on Huger Street in Cheraw. All of my growing up, it was called East Huger Street, but through some zoning laws now, it's called South Huger. Belle is my mom's middle name. Carrie, Belle, Dorsey, and Lashley. So the name of her beauty salon was Carrie's Beauty Rest. Someone mentioned to me that there was a listing in the Green Book for Belle's Beauty Shop on Huger Street. I said, oh, that's my mom. And so, of course, you know, we have documentation of her shop being there. It was, my mother went to Apex Beauty College in New York and graduated in 1941. She came back to Cheraw and started the beauty shop in Cheraw, and she worked for the little shop that she worked in belonged to a lady named Miss Lim Munnerling, and so she worked in there for several years, and then she decided to kind of branch out on her own. The beauty shop stayed in that community all of the time that she worked as a beautician. We moved out of my grandmother's house across the railroad track to a big house. I remember Mom doing hair there. We moved from that house to to Jericho Street first, and she did hair in the back of that house. And then we moved on the next street over, Maynard Street, and she did hair there, and ended up at 135 Maynard Street. That was the last place that she did hair, but it always remained Carrie's Beauty Rest was the title of her, was the name of her shop.
Mr. Harry Watson was the owner of Watson Restaurant. Now, I don't know Harry really, his folks, I believe they were from out of Marlboro County, but he was the owner of that restaurant. He sold plates of food. He sold food like neck bones and rice, and he sold food like stew meat and rice, and food like fried chicken. He said he had the best fried chicken that you ever tasted in your life because he had some kind of dip. He put it in some kind of dip, and then would come out with a beautiful brown crust on them, and it was just delicious. And at Thanksgiving, he would do turkey dressing. Now, he didn't have to have the turkey, but people would go there just for the dressing on Thanksgiving, white and black. And they would go there for that dressing. It was delicious. But he was a real cook. Cook anything, ham, turkeys, whatever. White and black went there for him to cook that kind of food. He sold beer. He had a piccolo in there. He had these beautiful booths in there. He even had menu. He had a menu on a blackboard that you can order from. He sold any kind of sandwiches you wanted. Ham sandwich, chicken sandwich, fish sandwich, beer, wine. And he was such a wonderful man to deal with, very soft-spoken, but he didn't take no stuff. You had to go there decent and in order.
On top of the Watson Cafe, Watson Restaurant was Miss Margaret Campbell's beauty shop. I used to go up there and get my hair done all the time. I remember Dr. Hannah's office being on the corner up there. My dad had a pool room that was up there before he moved out to Valley Moya, and he used to run the pool room right next to Watson's Cafe.
Imperial Barbershop. Now that name, back in the day, we didn't really care about the name part. We just wanted to know who was running the barbershop, who owned the barbershop. But the Imperial Shop was owned by Mr. Long. He had 3 chairs in there. He had the first chair. A man by the name of Mr. Rittenberg off of Cash Road had the second chair. And the third chair was for young men who wanted to learn how to cut hair. And he would train them in that third chair. Charge the price of getting a haircut was 35 cents, from 25 cents to 35 cents. And if you needed a shave, it was a nickel or so more, a dime, or depends on how much you wanted to shave, how you wanted to shave that. It was run by Mr. Johnny Tyson. Mr. Johnny Tyson was his Maggie Robertson's son. He specialized in bologna sandwiches. Bologna sandwiches was cheaper because you could get a bologna sandwich for a nickel or dime or something of that nature. But his mainstay was chicken and fish.
The Live Oak Tourist Home was next door to where we lived. Miss Pearl Smith ran it. She was a very nice lady. She used to cook quite a bit. She was a good cook.
There is an alumni association of Colter Memorial Academy, which was on the property which is right next door here to the College Inn. Colter Memorial Academy was a school for African American children that was begun in 1881 by the Presbyterian Church, which is just up the street from the College Inn. Colter Memorial Academy served African American children from Prima, which we call kindergarten now, through 2 years of junior college. And that school was in existence until 1955 in the town of Cheraw. And that was when the state took over the high school education of African Americans and built Long High School, which is now Long Middle School, out on West Green Street in Cheraw. The headmaster for Coulter Memorial Academy was Reverend George Waldo Long. And of course, he took up the gauntlet after Reverend Crawford, who started the school and developed it into what it became. I am now president of the Coulter Long Memorial Alumni Association. Coulter Memorial Academy and Long High School had two separate alumni associations. They merged in 2009, and so now from those two schools, Coulter Memorial Academy and Long High School, we have the association.
Knowing that the struggle that the blacks have gone through over 200 years, but to bring it down to even 50, 60, 70 years ago, how my parents and my family was struggling and trying to make it, but we did make a lasting impression on a lot of lives during this time.
It was helpful to the black people that came through here. All they had to do was stop on the block. If you stopped on the block and asked Harry Watson, asked Mr. Leon Poe, or asked Mr. Pear Long about anybody or anything in Cheraw, they could tell you. If there was a store or place or somebody you was looking for, they could tell you where they was and what street they lived on. That's the value of those men, you know. They could tell you those things back in the day. Like I'm telling this story today, they could tell you that back in those days.
I think the Green Book was a brilliant creation by Victor Green, who was a postman in New York, who thought of something that would help to keep black people safe while they were traveling. And I think it's important I have children, so I think it's important for my children to be able to see and to hear these stories so that they know that this is what went on. This was reality. This is what their great-grandparents and great-great-grandparents had to go through when they were traveling. When we travel today, we deal with our own struggles of trying to get safely from one destination to the other. The Green Book gives us perspective that this has been going on for a long time. And I'm just glad that during segregation that someone took it upon themselves to put this booklet together so that black people could travel and find somewhere safe where they could stay, somewhere where they could eat and have some dignity about themselves, because there were other establishments along their travels, but they could not patronize them. So I think the Green Book gave our people, it gave us our dignity. We were able to keep our dignity. And one thing about African Americans, we are resilient people. We are so creative. And I just think that it was just amazing that they were able to look at all these towns throughout the country that black people were traveling and put all these safe havens in one book.
A lot of people don't know the history of Cheraw. Cheraw has a very rich African American history, and it needs to be told.